Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own life, moving through rooms unseen, your words unheard, your very presence an afterthought? Imagine pouring your heart and soul into every interaction, every creation, only to have a vital piece of you snipped away, leaving just an empty space where your essence once was. This isn't a story about grand battles or mythical quests. It's about the quiet, agonizing invisibility that can creep into our lives, and the seismic roar that can erupt when a forgotten soul decides, with every fiber of their being, that enough is finally enough. It's about Tina Delgado, a freelance photographer from Phoenix, whose vibrant spirit was systematically cropped out of her family's narrative, until one day, she snapped, not in anger, but in a profound, earth-shattering act of self-reclamation that would paint a message across the very sky of her city. Tina had always seen the world in frames. From a young age, her eyes, keen and discerning, instinctively composed images, finding beauty and narrative in the mundane. Her camera, a worn, trusty companion, was less a tool and more an extension of her soul, allowing her to capture the fleeting dance of light, the unguarded truth in a stranger's gaze, the silent poetry of a desert sunset. She was a storyteller through pixels and prints, each photograph a carefully crafted verse. Yet, while she effortlessly gave voice to the world around her, her own voice, within the confines of her family, had slowly faded into a whisper, then into silence. Holiday photos, birthday gatherings, family vacations, the visual chronicles of shared moments became, for Tina, a cruel annual ritual. She would eagerly await the prints, a sliver of hope flickering within her, only to find herself systematically excised. A smiling face missing, an arm abruptly cut off, a void where she once stood. It started subtly, an awkward crop here, a slight omission there, always explained away with a casual, "Oh, you were on the edge, it was just easier." But over the years, the casual turned deliberate, the exceptions became the rule, until Tina learned to brace herself for the inevitable, a silent dread settling deep in her bones each time a new photo album arrived. She was there, she knew she was there, but the evidence of her existence, her participation, was meticulously erased. This wasn't just about photographs, it was about her very identity within the family structure. She was the one who listened patiently, the one who offered support without judgment, the one who always showed up, camera in hand, ready to document their lives. And, in return, she was the one whose presence was deemed expendable, a periphery figure whose inclusion marred the perfect, curated tableau her family wished to present to the world. The irony was a bitter pill. She, the artist of visibility, was rendered invisible by the very people who should have celebrated her light. Her modest Phoenix apartment, though filled with the warmth of her own artistic creations and the comfort of her beloved rescue cat, felt like a quiet sanctuary from a world that increasingly refused to acknowledge her. The ache was not a sharp, sudden pain, but a dull, persistent throb, like a phantom limb, reminding her of a connection that should be there but wasn't. She often wondered if they even noticed her absence, or if the blank spaces where she used to be had simply become part of their accustomed landscape, just as natural and unremarkable as the vacant wall where a cherished family portrait might hang in another home. This invisibility wasn't just neglect, it felt like a silent, slow erosion of her worth, a quiet whisper that told her she simply didn't matter enough to be included, to be remembered, to truly belong. The culmination of years of this quiet erasure arrived with the Christmas card from her sister, Brenda, a woman whose life seemed to be a perpetually curated social media feed. Tina had spent hours capturing Brenda's family, the vibrant chaos of their children, the warmth of their festive decorations. She had, as always, been behind the lens, diligently framing joy, laughter, and familial connection. She even remembered a moment, a rare one, where Brenda had pulled her into a group shot, a quick arm around her, a hurried smile. A tiny spark of hope had ignited in Tina's chest then, a fleeting belief that perhaps, this time, she might actually make it into the final cut. But when the glossy card landed in her mailbox, amidst a cascade of generic holiday greetings, her heart sank even before she opened it. The pristine white envelope, embossed with a silver snowflake, felt heavy with unspoken messages. Inside, a professionally printed card displayed a perfectly posed, cheerful family, all smiles and coordinated sweaters, against a backdrop of twinkling lights. And just as Tina had predicted, her breath catching in her throat, there was the undeniable, stark reality. She was gone. Not even a blurry edge remained. The space where she had stood, briefly, joyfully, was now a seamless, artificial continuity. It was the sharp, precise cut of a digital editing tool, erasing her as cleanly as if she had never been there. The caption, printed in elegant script beneath the smiling faces, read, "Wishing you a season of joy and togetherness from our family to yours." The hypocrisy was a fresh wound, twisting the knife of years of neglect. Joy and togetherness for their family, Tina realized with a bitter clarity, a family that had no room for her, not even in a photograph. This wasn't just an oversight. It was a deliberate act of exclusion, a reaffirmation that her presence, her love, her effort, were utterly inconsequential. Something inside Tina, a resilient core that had endured countless smaller slights, finally cracked. It wasn't an explosion of anger, but a cold, crystalline resolve. The quiet, gentle soul, who had always absorbed the pain, retreated into the familiar embrace of her camera. But this time, it wasn't to escape. It was to plot a new kind of photograph, one that would redefine her own frame. She spent the next few days in a haze of purposeful action, the hum of her computer, her only companion. She pulled up old self-portraits, discarded attempts, images where she had experimented with light and shadow, trying to capture not just her likeness, but her spirit. She was searching for something raw, something undeniable. She was looking for her. The idea for the billboard had been a nascent thought, a fleeting fantasy born of late-night despair, but now, fueled by the definitive proof of her erasure, it solidified into an unyielding mission. It would be a monumental undertaking, a financial drain, a public declaration. But Tina knew, with the certainty of a woman who had finally found her voice, that she had no other choice. This was not about revenge, it was about existence. It was about screaming, without uttering a single sound, that she was here, she mattered, and she refused to be forgotten anymore. She would use the very medium that had rendered her invisible to make herself unequivocally, undeniably seen. The pain of the past was being transmuted, drop by excruciating drop, into the fierce, unwavering energy of creation, a defiant act of self-love against a backdrop of profound neglect. Tina's apartment transformed into a command center, its usual quiet hum now punctuated by the incessant clicking of her mouse and the soft glow of her monitor. The air thickened with the scent of coffee and the quiet intensity of her focus. The concept of the billboard, once a whispered fantasy, now occupied every corner of her mind, demanding meticulous planning and unwavering courage. The first hurdle was financial. Freelance photography, while fulfilling, rarely offered a surplus. Every cent she had saved, painstakingly put aside for a down payment on a modest studio, or perhaps even a long-dreamed-of trip to photograph the northern lights, would now be rerouted. The thought brought a pang of loss, but it was quickly overshadowed by the profound sense of purpose. This was an investment in her soul, a down payment on her dignity. She researched billboard companies, wading through jargon about impressions, traffic counts, and lease agreements. She wanted a prime location, a spot where the message couldn't be ignored, where it would loom large over the daily commute, infiltrating the subconscious of thousands. She narrowed down her options to a massive digital billboard on a major Phoenix thoroughfare, a location that promised maximum visibility. The cost was astronomical for her budget, a dizzying sum that made her stomach clench, but her resolve was stronger than her fear. This wasn't just a sign, it was her declaration, her manifesto, and it had to be unavoidable. The second, equally crucial, hurdle was the image itself. It couldn't be just any photograph. It had to be the photograph. She had countless self-portraits in her archives, experiments in light and shadow, playful expressions, pensive gazes. But none felt quite right. They were beautiful, yes, technically perfect, perhaps, but they lacked the raw, unvarnished truth she needed to convey. She spent days, then weeks, revisiting her own image, her own reflection. She set up her studio lights, the softboxes casting a warm, enveloping glow. She stood before the lens, not as a photographer composing a shot, but as a subject bearing her soul. She stripped away layers of expectation, of self-consciousness, of the masks she unconsciously wore. She wanted to capture the weariness of being overlooked, yes, but also the enduring strength, the quiet resilience, the glimmer of defiance in her eyes. It was an arduous, emotionally draining process. She captured the fragility, the quiet pain that had settled deep within her, the weight of years of silent invisibility. Then she shifted, seeking a different truth. She found a pose that conveyed a subtle yet profound sense of self-possession, her chin slightly lifted, her gaze direct, unwavering, almost challenging. Her expression was not one of anger, but of a quiet, unshakable dignity, a knowing sadness tinged with an emerging strength. It was a portrait of a woman who had been through the fire and, though scarred, was unbroken. It wasn't a smile, not a forced cheerfulness. It was a truthful, compelling image of quiet power, a depth of emotion that transcended mere physical likeness. Her eyes, the windows to her soul, held the narrative, a lifetime of feeling unseen, yet now, finally, seeing herself with unshakable clarity. This was the image, she realized with a shudder of recognition, that would become her voice. It was a testament to her inherent worth, a silent scream that resonated with the universal human desire to be acknowledged, to be valued, to simply exist, wholly and completely, in the frame of life. This portrait was more than just a picture. It was her very essence, distilled into light and shadow, ready to be magnified and cast upon the world. The day the billboard was scheduled to go live felt charged with an almost unbearable tension. Tina had chosen a Monday morning, prime rush hour, ensuring maximum exposure. She drove to the Billboard company's office, the contract, a crisp, intimidating document clutched in her hand, her heart thrumming against her ribs like a trapped bird. The process was cold, efficient, almost anticlimactic. Paperwork, a quick handshake, a confirmation of the digital upload. The indifference of the process workers, accustomed to corporate logos and flashy advertisements, was a stark contrast to the earthquake rumbling within Tina. To them, she was just another client, another transaction. To her, this was an act of war waged for her own soul. After leaving the office, she drove, not directly home, but towards the chosen thoroughfare, her hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. She wanted to be there, to witness the moment it materialized, to see her chosen image, her chosen words, bloom against the vast phoenix sky. She parked discreetly in a nearby lot, trying to appear nonchalant, her eyes fixed on the towering metal structure that stood like a silent sentinel over the stream of morning traffic. The billboard was enormous, a colossal digital canvas that cycled through advertisements every few seconds, a new car, a fast food promotion, a real estate agency. Tina watched the familiar carousel of consumerism, her breath held tight, a nervous energy buzzing through her veins, and then, there it was. One moment, a smiling family enjoying ice cream. The next, the screen flickered, a transient blackout, and then, her face. Larger than life, impossible to ignore, staring out at the thousands of passing cars. Her self-portrait, rendered in vivid detail, filled the massive screen. Her eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, held the gaze of every driver, every passenger, every pedestrian. It was a face that conveyed quiet strength, subtle sorrow, and an undeniable resilience. Beneath it, in bold, stark lettering, were the words she had chosen, words that sliced through the mundane morning commute like a shard of ice. "Merry Christmas from the one you forgot." The juxtaposition was jarring, almost brutal. Against the backdrop of holiday cheer, of consumerist urges and hurried routines, her message landed like a seismic shockwave. It wasn't angry, not accusatory in a loud way, but profoundly, devastatingly honest. It was a whisper amplified to a roar, a quiet heartbreak laid bare for an entire city to witness. Tina felt a dizzying mix of emotions, a profound sense of liberation, a raw vulnerability, and a surge of defiant pride. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the edges of the colossal image, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were the unshed tears of a lifetime, finally released, cleansing, purifying. She had done it. She had found her voice, not in words spoken, but in a monumental, undeniable visual statement. The cold steel of the billboard, the impersonal glow of the digital screen, now held the most intimate, personal message she had ever dared to convey. It was out there, for all to see, for all to ponder. She had staked her claim, asserted her existence, in the most public way imaginable. And as the cars streamed by, some slowing, some honking in confusion, others staring with open mouths, Tina knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her bones, that she was no longer invisible. She was impossible to ignore. Her image, once confined to her camera's memory card, then cropped from family photos, now commanded the attention of an entire city, a monument to a truth long suppressed. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of confusion, curiosity, and not a small degree of discomfort. The billboard, a stark emotional anomaly amidst the usual commercial clutter, became an instant focal point. Cars slowed, drivers craned their necks, passengers pointed. The simple, direct caption, "Merry Christmas from the one you forgot," struck different chords in different people. For some, it was a moment of uncomfortable recognition, a sudden, personal connection to a nameless stranger's pain. For others, it was baffling, a puzzling piece of performance art, or a strange, elaborate prank. The local news channels picked up on it almost immediately, a quirky human interest story that offered a brief reprieve from the grim headlines. News helicopters hovered, their rotors a distant hum that invaded Tina's quiet apartment, a constant reminder that her deeply personal act was now a public spectacle. Reporters, eager for a scoop, staked out the billboard, interviewing bewildered commuters and speculating wildly about the identity of the forgotten one. The general sentiment among the early commentators was a mix of mild amusement and concern, some dismissing it as an attention-seeking stunt, others wondering if it was a cry for help. Among the most vocal critics was Marcus Thorne, a self-proclaimed voice of reason on a popular local radio talk show, notorious for his cynical, often derisive commentary. His morning segment, usually filled with diatribes about local politics or rising taxes, quickly pivoted to the mystery billboard. Another day, another desperate cry for attention. Thorne scoffed into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't art, folks. It's a monument to self-pity. Who is this forgotten one, exactly? And why should we care about their alleged holiday woes? Phoenix has real problems, people. This is just a sad public display of, well, frankly, of patheticness. Someone clearly needs a hobby, or perhaps a therapist, instead of wasting prime advertising space on their personal grievances." His words, broadcast over the airwaves, found fertile ground among those who preferred neat, easily digestible narratives, or who simply felt uncomfortable with such raw, public emotion. Meanwhile, back in Tina's family, the reaction was a chaotic blend of shock, denial, and thinly veiled anger. Brenda, her sister, was the first to call, her voice trembling with a furious disbelief. "Tina, what on earth have you done? Do you know what people are saying? This is humiliating. It's an attack on us. Everyone's asking if we're the family who forgot you. How could you be so selfish, so cruel? The collective family narrative, carefully constructed over years, was crumbling under the harsh light of public scrutiny. Tina's parents, usually masters of passive-aggressive dismissal, were uncharacteristically direct, their voices laced with wounded indignation. "We always tried our best for you, Tina," her mother wailed, a practiced tremor in her voice. "We gave you everything. How can you imply such a terrible thing? We never forgot you." The calls, the texts, the accusatory voicemails poured in, each one a testament to their own selective amnesia, their inability or unwillingness to confront the reality of their actions. They saw the billboard not as Tina's desperate plea for recognition, but as an act of betrayal, an unwarranted public shaming that threatened their carefully cultivated image of familial perfection. They were enraged, not by their own behavior, but by Tina's audacity to expose it. Tina listened to their escalating outrage with a detached calm. The words, once so potent in their capacity to wound, now seemed distant, almost hollow. Their anger, she realized, was proof of the billboard's efficacy. It had pierced their carefully constructed bubble of denial. They couldn't crop her out of this. She had occupied a space they couldn't control, a canvas too vast for their digital shears. She knew the storm would be difficult to weather, the accusations painful to endure, but a profound sense of peace settled over her. For the first time, she was truly, unequivocally seen, even if that visibility came wrapped in controversy and familial wrath. She had thrown a stone into the placid waters of their indifference, and the ripples were finally reaching the shore. Miles away, in a glass-walled office overlooking the city, Eleanor Vance, owner of several prestigious art galleries and a formidable figure in Phoenix's cultural landscape, sat at her immense mahogany desk, surrounded by the cool hum of technology and the subtle scent of expensive coffee. Her life was a meticulously orchestrated symphony of meetings, deadlines, and philanthropic galas, leaving little room for emotional spontaneity. The holiday season, usually a whirlwind of social obligations and high-stakes year-end deals, was particularly stressful. She yearned for genuine connection, for something beyond the superficial glitter that seemed to coat every interaction. As she scrolled through her newsfeed during a brief lunch break, the image of the billboard flashed across her screen. Phoenix's Mystery Billboard. The headline read, accompanied by Marcus Thorne's dismissive commentary. Eleanor paused, her finger hovering over the screen. She typically ignored such local sensationalism, but something in the image, the starkness of the portrait and the raw honesty of the caption, snagged her attention. She had seen countless billboards, an endless parade of commercial art designed to entice and persuade. But this was different. This wasn't selling anything. It was saying something, with an almost brutal sincerity. The portrait itself was what truly captivated her. Eleanor's trained eye, accustomed to discerning authenticity and artistic merit, immediately recognized the quality of the photography. The lighting, the composition, the depth of emotion conveyed in the subject's eyes. It was masterfully executed. It wasn't just a photograph, it was a testament to pain, resilience, and an undeniable artistic voice. She found herself drawn into the subject's gaze, a profound sense of empathy stirring within her, an unfamiliar sensation amidst her highly structured life. Marcus Thorne's disdainful voice, echoing from her tablet, snapped her out of her reverie. Pathetic, attention-seeking, he droned on. Eleanor felt a flicker of annoyance, then a surge of quiet defiance. Thorne's cynicism, she realized, was precisely what made this billboard so potent. It cut through the noise, the superficiality, the carefully constructed facades of modern life. It was honest in a world that craved artifice. She closed her tablet and stood, walking to the panoramic window that overlooked the city. From this vantage point, she could almost glimpse the billboard in the distance, a luminous beacon against the urban sprawl. She wasn't merely an art patron, she was a champion of authentic expression, a seeker of truth in a world often blinded by glamour. And in that raw, exposed portrait, she sensed a truth that resonated deeply within her own often overlooked desire for deeper connection. The billboard wasn't a cry for pity, she realized. It was a declaration of existence, an assertion of self-worth from someone who had clearly been denied it for too long. It was an act of profound courage, transforming personal anguish into public art. Eleanor, herself a woman of immense power and influence, often felt the burden of her position, the expectation to be polished, controlled, perfect. This raw, unfiltered expression spoke to a part of her that yearned to break free from the constraints of expectation. She felt a connection to the unknown artist, a kinship born of shared human experience. This wasn't just a local curiosity, it was a profound statement, an artistic intervention in the commercial landscape, forcing people to confront not just the billboard, but themselves. Eleanor felt a deep-seated conviction growing within her. This wasn't just about a forgotten one, it was about everyone who had ever felt overlooked, marginalized, or erased. And, as an authority figure in the world of art and culture, she knew she had a role to play. She wouldn't just observe this phenomenon, she would understand it, protect it, and if possible, amplify the voice behind it. Her initial professional detachment dissolved, replaced by a nascent drive to uncover the story behind the compelling image, to give the forgotten one the recognition she so clearly deserved. This was not a business venture, it was a deeply personal calling, a sudden, powerful reawakening of her own human empathy. Driven by an uncharacteristic impulse, Eleanor Vance dispatched her assistant to quietly gather information about the billboard. Not about the advertising company or the client contract, but about the photographer. She wanted to know who had captured that raw, compelling self-portrait, who possessed the eye and the courage to transform such personal pain into a public masterpiece. Her assistant, accustomed to Eleanor's precise, often demanding requests, returned with a name, Tina Delgado, a freelance photographer with a sparse online presence, mostly showing landscape work and event photography, but nothing quite like the billboard image. Eleanor spent hours poring over Tina's limited portfolio, a deep sense of admiration growing within her. Tina's earlier works, though commercially driven, possessed an underlying sensibility, a keen awareness of light and emotion. But the self-portrait on the billboard was different. It was a revelation, a testament to an untapped well of profound artistic expression. It spoke of a hidden talent, an overlooked virtuoso whose true potential had been simmering beneath the surface, waiting for a catalyst to ignite it. This confirmed Eleanor's initial intuition. Tina Delgado was no mere attention seeker. She was an artist of exceptional merit, whose work deserved a wider stage. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne, basking in the public's initial confusion and the surge in his radio show's listenership, doubled down on his vitriol. He presented Tina's anonymous act as a symptom of a larger societal decay, a self-indulgent cry for validation in a world that had gone soft. He invited callers who echoed his sentiment, dismissing the billboard as whining and manipulative. This so-called art, Thorne boomed, his voice resonating with manufactured outrage, is nothing more than a childish tantrum on a grand scale. What about the families who do celebrate Christmas, who do cherish their loved ones? This person is tainting a joyful season with their personal baggage. It's emotional blackmail, pure and simple. His words stoked the flames of controversy, creating a fierce public debate. Social media exploded, dividing into camps. Those who sympathized with the forgotten one, sharing their own stories of feeling invisible, and those who sided with Thorne, condemning the billboard as inappropriate, selfish, or even mentally unstable. The family, particularly Brenda, saw Thorne's commentary as vindication. "See, Tina?" Brenda screeched over the phone. "Even Marcus Thorne thinks you're crazy. You're making us a laughingstock." Tina, however, remained silent, absorbing the public outcry, the accusations, the thinly veiled attacks on her sanity. She knew the storm was necessary. The billboard was doing its job, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths, both about themselves and about how society often treats those who don't fit into neat, picturesque frames. The anonymity was both a shield and a powerful amplifier. Without a face to attach to the pain, people projected their own experiences onto the image, making it universal. Eleanor, however, was not content to merely observe. She understood the power of Thorne's narrative, how easily public sentiment could be swayed by cynical rhetoric. She needed to counter it, to give Tina's art the context it deserved. She had Tina's address, but she hesitated to simply knock on her door. This required a delicate touch, an approach that honored the profound vulnerability Tina had already displayed. She researched Tina's past exhibition attempts, her freelance work, noticing how consistently her unique perspective was overlooked in favor of more conventional, commercially safe photographers. It was a pattern Eleanor recognized. True innovation often struggled against the established gatekeepers. This hidden gem, as Eleanor now thought of Tina, had been systematically undervalued by the very institutions that should have nurtured her talent. Eleanor knew that she had the power to change that. She decided to approach Tina not as a gallery owner seeking a new artist, but as a human being deeply moved by her powerful statement. She crafted an email, carefully, thoughtfully, conveying her genuine admiration and offering not just support, but understanding. She refrained from promises, instead focusing on the profound impact Tina's work had had on her, a personal testimony to the Billboard's piercing honesty. The email subject line was simple, direct, and respectful. A message of deep appreciation for your art. It was a genuine plea for connection, an invitation for Tina to step, finally, from the shadows into a supportive, understanding light. The days following the Billboard's appearance were a surreal blend of intense public scrutiny and profound personal quietude for Tina. While the city buzzed with speculation and debate, Tina remained a phantom, observing the uproar from the safe solitude of her apartment. The relentless media circus, particularly Marcus Thorne's vitriolic attacks, felt like a public dissection of her soul. His voice, amplified by radio waves and social media, painted her as unstable, selfish, and desperate. Each sneering remark was a fresh sting, a reaffirmation of the very reason she had erected the billboard in the first place. Her family, emboldened by Thorne's narrative, intensified their attempts to silence her. Her mother's calls became less tearful pleas and more sharp, accusatory demands. "You need to take that down, Tina. Do you know what this is doing to your father? He's a respected man. This is ruining our reputation." Brenda sent furious texts, threatening to sever ties entirely. "You're a disgrace, Tina. We're ashamed to even be associated with you." The pressure was immense, a psychological assault designed to force her back into her accustomed invisibility. Yet, amidst the cacophony, a stubborn resilience had bloomed within Tina. The billboard had given her a shield, an undeniable truth that stood impervious to their gaslighting. She was no longer accepting their narrative. She had created her own. Then, Eleanor Vance's email landed in her inbox. Tina, wary of the media's relentless pursuit, almost deleted it without opening. But the subject line, "A message of deep appreciation for your art," was unlike any other she had received. There was no demand, no accusation, no sensationalism, just respect. She opened it, her fingers trembling slightly. The words that unfolded on her screen were a balm to her weary soul. Eleanor wrote not as a critic, nor as a public figure seeking an exclusive interview, but as an individual deeply moved by the artistry and raw emotion of the billboard. She spoke of recognizing the truth in Tina's eyes, of understanding the unspoken narrative of invisibility, and the profound courage it took to make such a public statement. There was an earnestness, a sincerity, that cut through the noise of the past few days. Eleanor didn't demand an answer or a meeting. She simply offered understanding and genuine admiration. For the first time since the billboard went up, Tina felt truly seen, not as a spectacle, but as an artist, as a human being. It was the validation she had yearned for her entire life, coming from a complete stranger, yet resonating with a deeper truth than any familial acknowledgement had ever offered. She spent hours crafting her reply, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, wanting to convey the depth of her gratitude, the profound isolation she had felt, and the reasons behind her desperate act. She recounted the years of feeling cropped out, the slow, agonizing erosion of her self-worth, the breaking point that led her to invest every last cent in a public declaration. She poured out her heart, sharing her story with a vulnerability she hadn't dared to express even to herself. When Eleanor received Tina's email, she read it multiple times, each reading deepening her resolve. Tina's words painted a vivid picture of quiet suffering, of an artist whose talent was overshadowed by a family's systemic neglect. It was a story not just of one woman, but of countless individuals whose worth goes unrecognized, whose contributions are dismissed, simply because they don't fit into predetermined molds. Eleanor knew then that her role was not merely to appreciate, it was to advocate. She felt a profound responsibility to use her platform, her influence, to give Tina the recognition she deserved, not just for her art, but for her courage. The conversation that followed, via encrypted messaging, and then finally over a discreet video call, was pivotal. Eleanor, poised and empathetic, listened intently as Tina elaborated on her journey, the pain etched in her voice, yet underscored by a newfound strength. Tina spoke of the catharsis of the billboard, of finally reclaiming her narrative. Eleanor, in turn, shared her own insights, her understanding of the subtle ways in which society can diminish individuals, particularly those who don't conform to easy categorization. She spoke of her own frustrations with the superficiality of the art world, the constant search for genuine expression amidst manufactured trends. This was not a business proposition. It was a meeting of kindred spirits, two women from vastly different worlds, united by a shared understanding of authenticity and the human need to be seen. As their conversation drew to a close, a plan began to form, a daring proposition that would not only elevate Tina's art, but also force the city, and especially her family, to confront the profound message of the forgotten one. Eleanor's conviction solidified. This wasn't just about a billboard, it was about sparking a larger conversation about value, visibility, and the true meaning of connection in a world too often blind to the quiet suffering of those on the periphery. Eleanor Vance, a woman known for her strategic brilliance and unwavering commitment to artistic integrity, moved swiftly and decisively. She understood that simply validating Tina's billboard privately was not enough. The message needed to resonate on a grander scale, to force a reckoning. She scheduled a press conference at her most prominent gallery, typically reserved for unveiling world-renowned artists or announcing major philanthropic initiatives. The art world, local media, and social commentators, including a visibly perplexed Marcus Thorne, gathered, buzzing with anticipation. Eleanor, poised and elegant, stepped onto the podium, her voice resonating with quiet authority. She began not by praising Tina's photography, but by speaking directly to the universal human experience of invisibility. She recounted stories, not of Tina's specific family, but of the countless individuals whose worth is overlooked, whose voices are silenced, whose contributions are dismissed. Then, with a dramatic pause, she unveiled a monumental reproduction of Tina's billboard self-portrait, now meticulously printed on a gallery-quality canvas, taking center stage in the exhibition hall. For weeks, Eleanor declared, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces, the city of Phoenix has debated the meaning of this image. Many, unfortunately, have chosen to dismiss it as a cry for attention, a petty grievance. But I see something else entirely. I see profound courage. I see unbridled talent. I see a mirror reflecting a truth we often choose to ignore, the quiet dignity and immense value of those we, as a society, too often forget. She then introduced Tina Delgado, who emerged from backstage, a quiet tremor in her hands but a newfound resolve in her eyes. The flashbulbs popped, a sudden storm of light. For the first time, the forgotten one had a face, a name, a voice. Tina, guided by Eleanor's steady presence, spoke simply, eloquently, recounting her personal journey not with bitterness, but with a profound sense of self-awareness. She spoke of the emotional toll of being constantly cropped out, of the desperate need to reclaim her narrative. This billboard, Tina explained, her voice gaining strength with each word, was not an act of revenge, it was an act of survival. It was my way of saying, I am here, I matter, and I refuse to be erased. Marcus Thorne, initially smirking in the front row, found his cynicism faltering. The raw authenticity of Tina's words, amplified by Eleanor's endorsement, began to chip away at his manufactured outrage. The narrative he had so carefully constructed was crumbling before his eyes. The public, too, watched, captivated. The shift in perception was palpable. The pathetic act was now undeniably courageous. The attention-seeking stunt was revealed as a profound artistic statement. Eleanor then announced a major exhibition of Tina's work, showcasing her other photographs, which, viewed through the lens of her personal story, took on new layers of meaning. She also announced the establishment of a fund to support overlooked artists, named in honor of Tina's act of defiance. The family, watching the live broadcast from their respective homes, was forced into a stark reckoning. Brenda, her face pale, saw the truth in Tina's eyes, undeniable now that the world was seeing it. The collective shame and anger they had directed at Tina now turned inward, a crushing realization of their own cruel neglect. Their carefully constructed facade of familial perfection shattered. The public outpouring of support for Tina was overwhelming. People shared their own stories of feeling overlooked, validating Tina's experience as a universal one. The billboard became a symbol of self-worth, a rallying cry for anyone who had ever felt invisible. Marcus Thorne, facing a backlash from his listeners, issued a begrudging, awkwardly worded apology on his show, a hollow echo of his previous bravado. But it was too late. His authority had been undermined by the sheer force of Tina's truth. The cathartic climax arrived at the exhibition's opening night. Tina, standing amidst her powerful photographs, was no longer the quiet, overlooked woman. She was an artist, a beacon of resilience, surrounded by admirers and supporters. Her family, with hesitant steps, approached her, not with demands or accusations, but with expressions of profound regret. Her mother, tears streaming down her face, finally uttered the words Tina had longed to hear. "We truly are sorry, Tina. We were so wrong. We never saw what was right in front of us." The words were an apology, yes, but also a recognition, a validation of her entire existence. Tina, looking at her mother, felt a complex mix of emotions. The pain wasn't erased, but the wound had finally begun to heal. She had found her voice, not just for herself, but for all the forgotten ones. Tina Delgado's life transformed beyond anything she could have imagined. Her exhibition at Eleanor Vance's gallery was a resounding success, leading to national recognition, commissions, and a newfound respect for her unique artistic vision. She was no longer just a freelance photographer. She was an acclaimed artist, her work sought after for its raw emotion and profound storytelling. The billboard, once a defiant act of desperation, became a monument to her courage, a permanent fixture in the collective consciousness of Phoenix, a reminder that every individual holds immeasurable worth, even when it goes unrecognized. Tina used her platform not for personal gain, but to amplify the voices of others. She became an advocate for emerging artists, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds, ensuring that their talents would not suffer the same fate of invisibility that had plagued her own journey. She established workshops in underserved communities, teaching photography as a tool for self-expression and empowerment, helping others find their own visual voice. Her simple apartment, once a quiet sanctuary from a world that overlooked her, now buzzed with creative energy, filled with students eager to learn, and collaborators inspired by her journey. She found a profound satisfaction in helping others step into their light, ensuring that the legacy of her forgotten past would be one of unwavering support and visibility for future generations. As for her family, the billboard had forced an uncomfortable yet ultimately necessary reckoning. The initial shame and anger slowly gave way to a grudging admiration, then genuine remorse. Brenda, humbled by the public's overwhelming support for Tina, reached out, not with demands, but with tentative apologies and a genuine desire to mend their fractured relationship. Tina's parents, stripped of their carefully constructed narrative of perfection, began the slow, arduous process of acknowledging their past behaviors. There were no instantaneous Hollywood reconciliations, no magical erasures of years of neglect. But there were steps, small, significant steps, towards a more authentic connection. Tina, now secure in her own worth, approached these interactions with a quiet grace, offering forgiveness not as an obligation, but as a choice born of inner peace. She knew that healing was a journey, not a destination, but she was finally able to walk it on her own terms, with her head held high. The "Merry Christmas from the One You Forgot" billboard, though eventually replaced by new advertisements, left an indelible mark on the city. It became a powerful, unspoken reminder that sometimes the most profound messages come not from polished campaigns, but from the raw, unfiltered cry of a human heart. It demonstrated that art could be a catalyst for social change, a mirror reflecting collective truths, and a beacon of hope for anyone feeling lost in the shadows. So, what does Tina's story tell us? It tells us that true worth is not bestowed by external validation, but discovered from within. It reminds us that invisibility, though painful, can forge an unparalleled strength, and that the quietest voices often hold the most resonant truths. It teaches us that sometimes, to be truly seen, we must be audacious enough to create our own spotlight, to reclaim our narrative, and to declare our existence to the world, even if it feels terrifying. Most importantly, it implores us to look closer at the people around us, at the quiet ones, the ones on the periphery, the ones whose contributions might be subtle, but are no less vital. For within each overlooked individual lies a universe of untold stories, unrecognized talents, and profound emotional depth, waiting for someone, anyone, to simply see them. So, the next time you feel unseen, remember Tina, remember her courage, and then, consider, who in your own life might be feeling forgotten? Whose story are you inadvertently cropping out? Take a moment to truly see them, to acknowledge their presence, to validate their worth. Share Tina's story with someone who needs to be reminded of their own undeniable value, or someone who needs to be reminded to truly see others. Comment below on a time you felt invisible, or a time you helped someone else feel seen. Let's create a world where no one has to erect a billboard to declare their existence, where every person is celebrated for the unique, irreplaceable masterpiece that they are.